Hey gang, Dean Hansen here at Farmers Insurance. I wanted to address a very basic portion of auto policies and a question that we get a lot. It's a bunch of information. I'm going to breeze through it as quickly as I can, and then maybe I can even offer a link to a longer explanation if you prefer. But it's all about auto liability. And as you can see on this presentation here, Auto Liability 101, it's pretty basic. And I want to just take a few minutes and explain how it is that auto liability works. So with liability, that's the state of being responsible for something, especially by law. So if there's an accident, somebody's always liable. Somebody's at fault. Sometimes the liability is split and it's part your fault and part somebody else's fault, but that's not very often. It's usually one person's fault or another. So there are two parts of auto liability. There's the bodily injury liability and there's property damage liability. And today we're going to talk about the bodily injury part. Property damage is pretty limited because it's limited to the damage you can do to a car. Most cars are under $50,000 or $40,000. Some are $100,000, some are $200,000. But the bodily injury liability is kind of important because it can be very extensive. It's not cheap to fix people when they're broken. Bodily injury is physical damage to another person's body. Property damage, of course, is damage to someone else's property. But like I said, we're going to talk about bodily injury today. So this matrix here shows all the different, first of all the different levels, not all of them, shows some levels of liability coverage that you can have on your auto policy. And let's say, for instance, real quick, that there's an accident. Okay, so imagine this. You get up in the morning, you grab your coffee, you jump in the car, you're going to go to work, and maybe the sun's coming up a little bit, so the sun's in your eyes or whatever, but all of a sudden, boom, you realize you're in an accident, and then you look up and realize you ran through a four-way stop sign, and you crashed right into a minivan, and there were people in there. What's the first thing that you think? It's got to be something like, am I okay? Am I injured? And let's say that you determine that you're not injured, or you're just bleeding a little bit, or you're minor injury. And then what's the next thing you think about? Is anybody else injured in that other car? What if somebody's badly hurt? What if somebody's dead? What if I've killed someone? So all those things are going to flood through your mind. And then shortly thereafter, of course, all this probably happens in milliseconds. Am I responsible for this accident? And how am I going to pay for all this damage? Is my insurance going to cover all of this? So just think about that for a second and think about, how do you feel right now about being uncertain about that? How much coverage do I have? I mean, I think I have full coverage, words that I hate because it's never true. But think about how you feel if that would happen to you. So let's say in this accident, dad has $150,000 worth of injuries, and that can be ambulance ride, intensive care, emergency room, surgery, time off work, prescriptions, pain and suffering. All of that fits within this $150,000. And so he has $150,000 worth of injuries. Mom has $45,000. Billy has $10,000 worth of injuries, for a total of $205,000 in total injuries. Now, if you have state minimum liability limits of 30/60, what that means is the insurance company is going to pay $30,000 per person within this accident for those injuries. $30,000. I've seen life flight bills more than that. And then it's $60,000 for the whole accident for all bodily injuries. So you could have two people with $30,000 worth of injuries and all that would be covered, but anything over that is not going to be covered. So if you have good limits, that's 100, 300. That's the minimum I actually will write in my agency. I don't want to be subpoenaed to a judge to answer for why I did something like $30,000 in this part of the country. So, and it's just irresponsible. And it gives people a false sense of security that they have insurance. And you do have some insurance, but you're not insured. Having some insurance and being insured are two different things. Then there's better limits, $250,000, $500,000. Again, that's $250,000 per person and $500,000 for the entire accident for bodily injuries. So you could have 10 people with $50,000 worth of injuries, and that would all be covered. Okay. So in this first scenario here with the 30/60, dad has $150,000 worth of injuries. Only $30,000 of that's covered. With mom, only 30,000 of hers is covered because it's limited to 30,000 a person. How much of Billy's injuries are going to be covered? Zero, because we've already reached the maximum of 60,000. It's very commonly misunderstood that that's how this works. So we have $60,000 worth of coverage, and we have $205,000 worth of injuries. So you'd be out of pocket $145,000. Yes, when the insurance company stops paying, you have to pay out of pocket. And if you don't fork over the money, then you get sued, and they can attach a judgment to any property you own. And in Texas, the laws are pretty, they're pretty safe. If you like, it can't make you sell your house to give them the money, but they can't if your house is homesteaded. But they can put a judgment on your home. So when you do sell your home, they're going to get the first portion of that money that comes out of the sale. Hope that's clear. Let's look at the 100, 300. With dad, 100,000 is covered, 45,000 is covered for mom, 10,000 is covered for Billy. So we have $155,000 worth of coverage, but we still have a $50,000 shortfall because only $100,000 of dad's injuries were covered in this accident. And then with 250, 500, dad's, mom's, and Billy's all covered. $250,000 is covered, so zero money out of pocket. Now, you may have to pay a deductible for your property damage, but we're talking about bodily injury liability right now. So in that instance, you'd not be out of pocket any money at all. So, definitely having better limits. It might cost a little bit more money monthly or however you pay your premium, but it's not going to be $145,000 more. And so one of the concepts about insurance that I try to share with my clients is it's better to have a $1,000 bad day than a $100,000 bad life. Like $145,000, you're never gonna. Normal people are never gonna pay that back. How do you do that? Making a normal wage, paying your bills, and you're gonna just kind of come up with $145,000 at some point. It's such a big hole. So further than this, there is another tool that you can use called an excess liability policy, also nicknamed umbrella, that extends these limits. If you have the 250, 500, then you qualify for an umbrella or an extended liability, excess liability of another $1 million. And the cost for those depend on your driving record, your credit, what other policies you have, that kind of thing. And the basics cover the extension of the liability on your auto, and it covers bodily injury and property damage. And it also extends the liability on your home or renter's policy too. And typically the cost for these are $300 to $500 usually, depending on your situation. Now, higher limits are available. You can get 5 million, 10 million. I have some clients that have umbrella policies that big. And kind of the concept is you want to make sure that the insurance company is a bigger target than you are. So if you have $1 million of net worth, you definitely want to make sure you have $1 million umbrella policy and on up from there. But just to protect yourself from something like this scenario, I recommend everybody have an umbrella policy, especially if you have youthful drivers. Think about this. They're driving around a 4,000-pound missile at 70 miles an hour with very little experience. Think about the damage that could occur. So now, under the better limits at the bottom there, the 250, 500, now imagine that you all of a sudden realize that you just got in an accident. You determine that you're not hurt, but you're like, oh my gosh, is someone in that other car injured? Oh my gosh, this is my fault. But I know that I've got my insurance set up right, so this is not going to be a financial disaster for me. I just need to go make sure these people are taken care of. Now, how do you feel about that incident? Let that soak in for a minute and feel and think about paying a little bit more money for better insurance is going to make that problem pretty much go away, financially at least. So if you would like advice on how to make sure that your insurance policy works well for you, please call us at 972-727-9705, or you can find me at iknowdean.com. We want to help you, so stay smart.